Welcome, everyone. We're so happy you could join us today for this conversation with authors Laura Alary and Glenys Nellist on Laura's new board book, Make Space for Jesus. It's such a sweet little book, learning about Lent and Easter. Now, just by way of a quick introduction, Laura Alary is a writer, storyteller, and religious educator. When she was a little girl, she used to make her own books out of manila paper, crayons, and mucilage. These early efforts at writing eventually gave way to academic papers and theses as she earned degrees in classics, theology, and New Testament. More recently, Laura has focused on a new type of education, raising 3 creative and curious children. She leads workshops on everything from storytelling to biblical interpretation, teaches the occasional university course, and works with children at a local congregation. Laura lives in Toronto, Canada. And leading our conversation today is Glenys Nellist. She was born and raised in a little village in northern England. The author of multiple children's books, including the best-selling "'Twas the Evening of Christmas," "The Wonder That Is You," and 5 popular series, Love Letters from God, Snuggle Time, "'Twas Good News," and Little Mole. Her writing reflects a deep passion for helping children discover joy and hope in the world, and Glenys lives in Michigan with her husband, David. Paraclete is so pleased to be the publisher of 4 of Laura's books: Look, which is a fantastic one for Advent and Christmas, Make Room for Lent and Easter, Breathe for Ascension, Pentecost, and the Growing Time, and now Make Space for Jesus. So today, you may have noticed this online, but if you registered for our chat today, you're being entered to win this little 3 set, which includes Make Space for Jesus, Make Room, and Breathe. So after our webinar is over today, we'll pick a winner and let you know who will be the lucky recipient of those 3 books. We love our authors. We're so happy to have the chance to meet together, share the wonderful gifts that they are contributing to the world of children's books on faith. So welcome again, Laura and Glenys, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Laura, how fun is this that we get to chat together about our favorite things, some of our favorite things. Yeah.
At last.
So we've never met, you and I, but I hope we will one day. I love Canada because to me, it's like Canada's like a mixture of England and America. So, you know, I love, and fish and chips is good there. So, I have to come and meet you one day. Yeah.
I hope so.
I just want to say thank you to Paraclete for inviting me to chat with you today. It's such a privilege. So let's start, Laura. I know we're going to chat about this gorgeous little book, which really is gorgeous, but I just want to start with, I love your tagline. I remember when I first saw it, I think on your website, and I thought, wow, I wish I'd thought of a tagline like that. Because if you don't know, if you haven't met Laura before, her tagline is writing stories that make us bigger on the inside. How cool is that? It's just so, I just love it, Laura. So, but what does it mean? Can you tell us why you chose that and how that captures you as an author?
Absolutely. I'll give you the fuller answer first and then give it to you in a nutshell. So the tagline, and I have to say, I'm pretty pleased with it as well, but I took it from one of my earlier books called Mira and the Big Story. And this book is kind of a parable about stories and the effect that they have on us. And in this book, there are 2 villages on either side of a river. So they're kind of sharing the same river valley, but there's a lot of conflict. Each village has its own origin story, or a tale about how their people ended up in the river valley. But these kind of sacred stories have become really divisive because each group believes that its story is true to the exclusion of anyone else's. So as a result, there's resentment and animosity, and they end up fighting with one another over who actually belongs in the valley and who doesn't. However, we have our main character, a little girl named Mira, and she has a quality that I think is so essential, and that is curiosity. So she's been raised on all of these, on her own stories, but also been told that the people across the river are others and just they don't belong there. But she's so curious about them. So her curiosity leads her to actually cross the river, where she meets one of the others. She meets a little boy. And to her surprise, when she meets him, she realizes that he's actually very much like her. And this, it's both frightening and disconcerting for her. And she goes back over and she starts wondering, well, are the stories wrong? So she goes to the most trusted person she can think of. And I'm going to read you just a little bit because this is where the tagline comes from. He says to her, Mira, let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger, not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and heart. But a story can make you smaller if it takes up all the space in your mind and heart. When new people or new ideas come along, there is no room for them. Whenever you hear a story, you must ask yourself, what is this story doing to me? Is it making me bigger or smaller? So in a nutshell, I try to tell and write stories that stretch both minds and hearts. So things that ignite curiosity and wonder and questions, but also make readers maybe more compassionate or more understanding toward other people. So they enlarge us.
Wow, Laura, that's really wonderful. I had no idea that your tagline was based on a book, and I'm so glad that we started with that question, because I know for sure the books, I haven't read all your books, but the ones I have, they definitely do that. I can see how they make you bigger on the inside, because you're so good at leaving that space for children and readers to wonder and find out more and grow on the inside. So yeah, it's so great to, yeah.
I really do. Yeah, I try to, I even the titles, make room. Yeah, I do continually try to leave those gaps so that we have room to interact and wonder.
Right, yeah, I think that's so wonderful, Laura. So you are the author of tons of books. I know some, many spiritual, but not all, some secular also. But a book that I love of yours is actually this one, which is called Make Room. Yeah, I see it behind you. And it's a child's guide to Lent and Easter. And so I know, as soon as I saw that you had this little board book coming out, I knew straight away, because I'm familiar with the cover, even though the title is different, I knew that, okay, she's made a board book out of this. So before we chat about the board book, can you tell me, like, how did the board book idea even come about? Was it your idea? Was it Paraclete? How did it come into being?
The board book was not my idea. In fact, the idea of writing a board book had never even crossed my mind. Like you, I love to write for children, but I think I consider my more natural audience to be sort of lower to mid elementary age. So Jenny Lynch from Paraclete reached out to me and said, you know, what do you think about the idea of adapting Make Room as a board book? And I thought, well, you know, sure, that's an interesting idea. I could try my hand at that. And I had no idea how difficult it was going to be until I actually sat down to try to do it. Well, as you know from reading it, and if anyone watching it is familiar with Make Room, you know that there's a lot of text in there.
Right.
For a picture book, it's probably double the length word count of your average picture book.
Right.
I went and checked. It's 1,900 words. Which is very long. So I was told, well, the picture book can't be any longer than 200. So I had to get rid of 90% of the text almost. So that was, it was very challenging for me. I always have too many words, no matter what I write, and then I have to pare back. So yeah, huge challenge. So my first go at it, I got it back to 800 words. And I wasn't actually using my word count tool at that point. I thought that I had condensed it enough. And then I realized I still had 800 words and thought, well, clearly this isn't going to work. So I tried it again and got it to 400. And then I just hit a wall and I had to reach out to John Sweeney, who was my editor at that time. And I said, please help, because I'm just so attached to these words. I can't cut anything else. So between the two of us, we managed to cut it in half again. And turn it into something new.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was fascinated to hear that bit of the process, because I knew that, Laura, when I knew that this book had quite a lot of words for a picture book. And so, well, I'm going to share what my favorite thing is later on after you've read your board book, but straight away I thought, how on earth did she do that? Because like you say, as authors, we get very attached to our words, don't we? You know, like we give birth to them and they're ours, and it's really hard to get rid of any. And so you just did really a phenomenal job. And I know we're going to hear you read your board book in a few minutes, but before we do that, let's just flip back to this, which was the original version, and just tell us a little bit, what was the inspiration behind this book? How did you come to write it? Like what does it contain?
Well, the story, well, not so much the story, but Make Room came about when my children were very young. My children are teenagers now, but when they were little, I had some very specific ideas about how I wanted to introduce them to Lent and kind of guide them through this season. And I was looking for resources to help me, and I just couldn't find what I was looking for. So I thought, well, I like to write. Why not? I'm going to write what I wish I could find. And I actually used it with my own children for quite a few years before it was ever published. So my own experience of Lent had been rather mixed. There were certain aspects of the season that I found, in some cases, actually frightening or negative or simply confusing. So when I had children of my own, I wanted to introduce them to the season in a way that was more positive and more purposeful. In particular, I really wanted them to get a sense of this season as a special time of growth and transformation. So as I see it, I mean, life in general and the life of the Spirit as well is all about transformation. And sort of Lent belongs within that broader context, but it's also got its own quality and its own characteristics. But I wanted my kids to be able to connect this, well, first of all, to have a sense of the positive dimension and purpose of the season, and also to connect this process of growth directly to the story of Jesus, so that they could see that the special things that we do during this time have a purpose. They're not just sort of disconnected traditions. They actually help us to grow in love as we follow Jesus along the way. I also wanted them, and this is a key for me too, I wanted them to hear the story of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus as an integrated whole. A lot of what I found when I was sort of building up our little library was books that focused exclusively on the death of Jesus, often in graphic detail, and often presented in terms of substitution. And I didn't want that. I wanted something different. And as far as Easter goes, I also wanted them to experience the story of Easter in a way that didn't tie it so tightly to a single sort of long time ago event. I wanted them to have a sense of this mystery that spills over into their own lives, so that the story of Easter becomes for them a story of ongoing hope that life continually comes out of death. So those, I've just talked a lot, but those were some of my specific goals. So I thought, okay, well, how am I going to do this? What will I write with my own children in mind, and then ultimately others? So I started just sitting with the story of Jesus in the wilderness. So when I just sat with it and kind of meditated on it, what came to me, or what I noticed, was this quality of space. There's physical space, but there's also the mental and spiritual space that comes from silence and simplicity and kind of getting away from usual responsibilities. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this can be my lens. And then I started reading through the rest of the Gospels, and I continually noticed that quality of space in Jesus' ministry. So he's always telling stories where the point is not really obvious. You really have to think about it and kind of stretch your mind. That's what the parables do. Or he's sitting down to share meals with people that others find objectionable. So there's this stretching or enlarging quality, making space and making room. So I chose that as my central image, and I wrote this book. And what it tries to do is to connect that story of Jesus with how we can move through the season of Lent. So it goes back and forth between the biblical text and the experience of a child, all with this bigger purpose of creating time, space, and room for growth. So that was make room. But then how do you turn all of that into a 200-word book?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like I couldn't retell the stories of Jesus because there's not space, and I couldn't have the same kind of back and forth again because of the word count restrictions. What I did, like in Make Room, I took the three sort of traditional aspects of Lent: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, and I reframed them a little bit. So prayer became make time, which was like intentional silence, stillness, listening, different forms of prayer. Fasting became make space, so simplifying, clearing out, letting go of things. And then almsgiving became make room, which was the acts of kindness, generosity. So when it came to kind of making those decisions about what was going to stay in the board book, I decided that I really wanted those three elements there. And I wanted some way, again, to connect them to the stories of Jesus, even if I couldn't retell all the parts of it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Laura, let me just backtrack a bit to something you said earlier about when you were deciding that you wanted to write this book, chiefly for your kids. And that's great, isn't it, that you wrote it for your kids, and then, you know, it gets published and used by so many in children's ministry and in homes. But I love what you said at the beginning, that when you decided to just sit with the story of Jesus in the wilderness, you know. And I think when we just sit with a story, that's where the wonder and the mystery and just making time for that story, like we're talking about right now in your book about making time and making space, just sitting with the story is so powerful, I think. And I feel like both these books are just ideal to be able to do that with. So before you read your board book, let me just, immediately, of course, anybody that's read this, you'll immediately recognize those three parts to it that you talked about earlier. The first one, making time. And I just thought it was complete genius, that because when I got the board book, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back now and I'm going to scrutinize how she did it, you know, what she included and what she left out. So, well, both books begin and end in, they begin exactly the same way, and both end pretty much the same way, which I love, that you retain the beginning and the ending. But so in the picture book, what I noticed when I started sort of really paying attention to how you did this is that the first section, which is making time, like you talked about, that's got 4 pages devoted to making time. But in your board book, it's just one spread. making time. And the way you took these four, I mean, that's a lot of words right there. The way you took 4 pages of words and made it one single spread and just captured the essence is genius. And people will hear it in a second. And then the second part, the second section, which is making space. And this is just so wonderful, the way you explore it in this big book. It's 12 pages, folks, 12. She took 12 pages with tons of words. I mean, it's all wonderful stuff. And again, she pared it down to one spread in the board book, and you'll see it. And then making room, the third section, again, 4 pages pared down to one spread. But you just totally captured like the gems of it. You know, you still managed for me to explain Lent to a young child in the most poignant, evocative way, in a complete economy of words. It's, yeah. And then both books end, don't they, with a little walk through Holy Week. Yeah. So anyway, I love both books, and I'm so excited for you too. Will you read your little board book for us? Make space for Jesus.
I would be delighted. And I also want to thank you for your comments, because I find that it's very encouraging and very gratifying for me to hear that, because as I say, I did struggle with the process, and I knew that, because I love Make Room, it's very close to my heart.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was going to be transforming it into something different, but I didn't want it to turn into something less than, if you know what I mean. Although
right.
It was much smaller and more pared down, I wanted it to be distilled into something that was still good and meaningful. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, you truly managed it, Laura. It's so good. So yeah, I'm excited to hear you read your little board book, Make Space for Jesus. And I think we're going to see the pages on the screen, right? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, wonderful. Let me mute.
And I don't know who is here and who is not here. There was a possibility that we might have a very young reader or a young listener here. I'm not sure if she's here, but if she is, I'm going to read this for Joanna. Make space for Jesus. This is the season of Lent. The church is dressed in purple. During Lent, we get ready. We listen. We wonder. We pray. Sometimes we use words or music or colors. Like Jesus, we make time for God. During Lent, we clean our house and give away what we do not need. We share so everyone can have enough. Like Jesus, we make space for good things to grow. During Lent, we share meals with people. We send greetings to anyone who is sad or sick. When someone seems lonely, we smile and say hello. Like Jesus, we make room. The last week in Lent is called Holy Week. Holy Week is filled with stories about Jesus. We hear how Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, how he shared a special meal with his friends, how he washed their feet and told them, "This is what you must do. Love each other as I have loved you." Oops. I'm just going to hold this up. We hear how people who did not like Jesus came and took him away. They made fun of him and hurt him. They put him on a cross. Jesus died. Now the church is not dressed in purple anymore. It feels sad. But on Sunday, we get up while it is still dark. We watch the sunrise. We hear the rest of the story, how God did a wonderful thing. Hallelujah, we sing. Jesus is alive again. The colors of the sunrise spill over into the church. What colors do you see? Lent is over. We have made time. We have made space. We have made room. It is Easter morning.
I hope everybody's clapping at home who is listening to that. It's so beautiful, Laura. I just don't really know how you came up with it from the other book, but so one of my favorite parts is, well, when my kids were little, we didn't really I mean, Easter, of course, Easter is always, a big celebratory season for us Christians, but I don't really remember celebrating Lent so much. I don't even know if we talked about it a lot, and going back to what you said before, you wanted to teach your kids about Lent, you wanted them to wonder about Lent, but there were no books to help you do it. So I had no books either, and neither did I write one. When my kids were little, but I wish I'd had this book when my children were little, because it's so simple, but it's powerful, because I think the way you invite children to make space and make room in real tangible ways that they can understand, so they can share with people who don't have enough, and they can make meals for people, or just be kind and compassionate, be good friends. I just think you give some very tangible ways in this book for little ones, for families to share how Lent is for little ones. And also my favorite thing is about how you talk about the colours of the liturgical seasons. I love that part too, that it begins with, this is the season of Lent, the church is dressed in purple, just the same as make room. And then how you, when Jesus dies, you referenced the sad colours. And then the resurrection part, how you invite children, what colours do you see, because I just think there's something powerful too. There's the page. Now the church is not dressed in purple anymore. I really think this idea of using liturgical colours is just a powerful way to connect children with the season of Lent and the colours of sunrise. I love that. Yeah.
In fact, I'm sorry, I just interrupted you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because you'd mentioned, you'd shown the first page, I really wanted to keep the beginning the same as Make Room, not only to connect the two books, but because the church is dressed in purple. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
I thought it was a very visual way of helping children connect what's in the book with their environment. Because really that's what I can say more about this in a bit, but that's what I hope this book will be. It will be a tool to help grown-ups, families, educators, help children make those connections between not only the stories and symbols of their tradition, but what's in this book and what's around them, what's in the world around them. It's a tool to help children notice and connect.
Right. And I'm sure it will do that. So Laura, what's your favorite part of the book? Do you have a favorite part or a favorite spread?
Can I say two?
Of course, it's your book.
Okay. So this is one of them. I really love the picture of the kids and the woman playing the piano, partly because I just love music, but also the text that goes with this part. It talks about different ways of praying. Sometimes we use words, and behind me, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, right here. This book, Praying in Color by Sybil Macbeth. that's been a really significant book for me in my own journey, and also in how I've kind of developed ways of walking through Lent with my own children. That was one of the first books I used to kind of try out, just explore different ways of praying. And I have such great memories of my kids being really young, like probably 3, 5, and 7, and just putting on some quiet music, lighting a candle, sitting down with crayons and paper and praying in color together for half an hour. So, so this is kind of a personal connection to this page. The other page that I love, you already showed. Just a second, where is it? Yeah, it's this one. I love this spread because of its simplicity. The way it gives children something visual to notice. Again, the sort of the absence of the purple that had been there. There are palms in the picture. There's a candle, but it's been extinguished. But it also gives them something to feel, or identifies the story with a particular feeling. I think that it's important, especially with really young children, that we point to the sadness around the death of Jesus and not place this heavy theological burden on it. So this is you know, it's multi-sensory, but it's emotional too. So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do love that page, and I'm just going to read the words again. Now the church is not dressed in purple anymore. It feels sad. And it really is emotive. And I was just thinking as you were talking about that page, how in my church right now, I'm married to a pastor, and you know, so we during Lent we have a big wooden cross that, you know, is very well, it's stark right now, it's bare, except each week we're placing some of the symbols on the cross, you know. But and so our children, the children in our church are seeing that cross, and it's got purple. There are purple cloths there right now. And then on Easter Sunday, they'll decorate it with flowers, and it'll all be yellow and orange. And I just think that you just captured that so well in this book, how, you know, those changing colors, and how children, if they have that experience in their churches, seeing the cross, which many do, this book will just reinforce what Lent is all about for them.
And if they have a different experience, you could still talk about how different churches do things in different ways. Like when I think about the church I was part of when my children were very little, the most prominent feature of the sanctuary wasn't actually the cross. It was this, it was an enormous wreath. It wasn't always there, but hung from a chain on the ceiling. But during Lent, it was this grapevine wreath that was probably 6 feet in diameter. So we're talking a substantial wreath. And then during Lent, it would be wrapped in purple. And then on Good Friday, that would be taken away. And so what remained looked very much like a crown of thorns. And then on Sunday, when we came in, of course, on Easter Sunday, someone had filled it with greenery and lilies and tulips. And so the visual transformation, and even olfactory, like you could smell the flowers on Easter Sunday. That was really powerful for children because it's so multisensory.
Yes, right. And it captures, as you said early on, the transformation that Lent is about, transformation. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the illustrations in the book, because aren't they beautiful? Are they watercolors? They're just pastels or something. They're so lovely. I love the illustrations by the illustrator called
Anne Boyajian.
Boyajian. Thank you for pronouncing that, because as someone who regularly gets called Gladys, I know it's important to get people's names right. So
I hope I got that right. But
yeah. So I know as an author that you probably didn't get to choose her, right, to illustrate. Is she the illustrator for your other books, for the Christmas book and for Breathe? No, that's a different one. Okay.
Anne also illustrated Look, the book for Advent. Okay. But Catherine Petersland illustrated Breathe. So Anne had done other books with Paraclete Press, including a beautiful book about centering prayer for children, which I had. So I was familiar with her work already when I knew that she was going to illustrate Make Room. So I was very pleased because I find her style very gentle. There's something very soothing and almost meditative about it. So I thought that her artistic style really suited the words. So I was very happy about that, even though I wasn't part of the choice because the author isn't usually. And also Anne and I we didn't communicate directly very much. Occasionally she had a question, like in Make Room, I refer to pretzel arms at one point, and she said, what are pretzel arms? How do I draw these? So I had to send her a photo of me doing that. But I think that even if there's not direct communication between an author and an illustrator, there's always a collaboration, even just determining, well, among everybody, but just, where as you figure out the layout of the book, where the page turns are going to fall, precisely what in the text is going to be illustrated, where the emphasis is going to be placed. So yeah, it's a dance.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, a dance. Yeah. So, how you had to pare the words down to the bare minimum, the really important text. So how did it work for the art then? Because again, I feel like the artwork that was chosen to accompany each page in the little board book is perfect. Did the illustrator also take a part in that, or was it your editors at Paraclete? Did you have a part? Was it a big surprise when you saw the illustrations they'd chosen?
That is a very good question, and unfortunately I can't answer it because I was not a part of that process. I didn't know exactly how the art was I knew it was going to come from Make Room, but I didn't know which details were going to be selected until I actually saw the digital version. Yeah,
it's fascinating. So I guess the art director then just worked on it. I bet that was an interesting way. Oh, Rachel's jumping in.
I'm popping back in to say what I can say.
What is it, Rachel? You know the answer.
Well, just only from very recent experience, we have our editorial team who, obviously see the immense value in every book. And as you said, Laura, I think it might have been Jenny's idea to try to make a board book out of Make Room. And we also, to my right, I'm pointing this way, although none of you can see, is our design department. We call it the pre-media department. And they are artists, interestingly, many of whom have young people, if not their own children, then godchildren in their lives. So as with every project at Paraclete, there's a lot of prayer and there's a lot of honoring of the artist and the author's creativity in the process too. So I think it's a little bit of a joint effort is the safe answer there.
Right. Well, not the dance, in other words.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
another part of the dance.
Yeah. Well, you all did a wonderful job, whoever was part of it. Yeah, it's so good. All right, Laura, so let's go back now. You talked a little bit earlier on about how you envision the book might be used through the season of Lent by either churches or families. Do you have anything else to add about how you suggest the book is used, or maybe any Lenten practices that you find meaningful and helpful with little ones?
I do. I could go on at some length, so you may have to stop me. I do have a little show and tell, though.
That's always fun.
I had to crawl through my basement, and then I was in a panic because I couldn't find it and I thought it was lost. This is something I made for my son. So my son is 18, so I made it when he was a baby. And it's a cloth book, and it turned out a little bit bigger than your average cloth book. But I wanted to give him something that he could have in church when he, we spent a lot of time walking up and down in the narthex, but when he was happy to sit in the service, I wanted something to show him. So I made this, and it goes through the seasons of the church year. So this is my favorite page. This is Advent, and there's little flaps so you can lift them up and and
Wow.
light and extinguish the candles. And then we've got, Christmas here. I hope you can see this. Epiphany. And here we're moving into Lent. So we've got the desert, and we have
Wow.
palms, and we've got little gates of Jerusalem that open and close. This was supposed to be for Maundy Thursday, although if you're from a Protestant tradition, it could also be kind of a page for the sacraments.
Yeah.
And Good Friday, Easter, you can move the stone.
Wow.
And Pentecost. Anyway, so moving on through that. The reason I wanted to show that is because it represents something for me. And the first thing it represents is that no matter how young they are, children are fully members of faith communities. And I believe it's both positive or possible rather, and beneficial to include children in whatever way we can as the community travels together through all the seasons of the church year. We just have to figure out ways to do that are age appropriate. So my hope for Make Space for Jesus is that it will be this kind of book, like the sort of thing, I mean, it's little, right? It's chunky little board book. So you could pop it into a bag, you could put it in your toddler's little backpack and have them bring it to church, flip through the pages, but then talk about it. Like, okay, so this church is dressed in purple. Is our church dressed in purple? Do you see any purple around? There are objects in here, like there are palms, there are crosses, there's a basin and a pitcher. Is there anything like that in our church? What do you see when you look around? There are stories mentioned in the book, even in pictures, even if they're not told. Maybe you can help your child connect. So for example, the cover image with the birds and the nest in the tree, those who know Make Room, of course, know that that's a reference to the parable of the mustard seed. That's not made explicit in here, but if you've got even a very young child who's been part of a godly playroom or Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, they'll have encountered that parable before, and maybe you can help them connect what's here with what they've experienced somewhere else. You could point out the pictures of Jesus in the book and see if you can figure out what stories they're telling. Are there pictures of Jesus in your church? In the windows? Is there art anywhere? What stories does it tell? So basically just using this book as a tool for making those connections. As far as you asked about favorite practices, though, I know this is sort of a separate part, but if I can just carry on. Kind of to break it down into 3 sections. Make time being prayer. I've already mentioned praying in color, but that is a really significant prayer practice for me and for my kids, even when they were toddlers. So I highly recommend that book by Sybil Macbeth. There is a children's edition as well, but I just sort of took the main book and adapted it. Another new book, and unfortunately I don't have a physical copy of it, but it's Sing, Wrestle, Spin, Prayers for Active Kids by Jennifer Grant. It's awesome. It's really, really good. Again, multi-sensory, using the body, but they're not all really active prayers. Like some are very still forms, but it's very playful. It's very open-ended. And I just, you could have a lot of fun exploring with your child.
Yeah, I totally second that book.
Yeah. I wish I had it right here, but I read a digital version of it. I also love prayer beads, but obviously not for infants and toddlers. But with older children, you can make prayer beads out of polymer clay or just string your own. Making space, the simplifying part. Simplifying physical space, I think, is something that is very easy to do, particularly with young children. It can be as simple as taking away a few familiar elements, like maybe a piece of artwork that normally hangs in a space, move it, getting rid of some familiar decorations. And again, it's meant to be exploratory. We're not saying clutter is bad or you shouldn't have these things around. It's more
Right.
just noticing what happens to a familiar space when you empty it out a little bit. Does it feel different? And I actually did that at work this year. I work in a library, and I took the table where we normally put our new acquisitions, and I put just a vase with some bare branches in it and some cloths around it. But then I thought, okay, I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm going to actually move furniture. So I took away the chairs that are normally behind it just to see if anyone would notice. And you could do that in a child's room, even with them, not so much take it away and see if they notice, but say, oh, there. Okay, so that's my little Lenten display. And then I decided to take it up a notch and move those chairs away. And some people did notice. One thing that I love to do and have done, again, since my children were very young, is to create a seasonal table. And I just have this tiny little table. It's maybe, a foot and a half wide. And I have different colors of cloths that I've made for it, but you don't need to have cloths. But you could put some simple Lenten symbols on it, like a bowl of earth or a bowl of sand to connect with the story of Jesus in the wilderness, or a vase with bare branches, or a simple grapevine wreath. And then it can be really interesting to transform those things for Easter. So for instance, to take the grapevine wreath and put greenery in it, or to take the bowl of earth and plant grass seed or watercress or something that grows quickly. Or the branch, for years, we would kind of make a tradition of going out, walking around the neighborhood, finding our Lenten branch, putting it in the vase, and then on Easter, we would hang the eggs that we decorated on it, and tie green ribbons on it, and just, again, transform it. The auditory environment is something to think about too. Like if you normally have a lot of stuff in the background, whether it's the television or music, just try, even for a short space of time, turning that off and seeing what the silence feels like. Or maybe coming up with a Lenten playlist. And I don't even mean religious music that's been written for the season. I just mean maybe music that's got a bit of a calmer feel about it.
Right.
Something that you could do together, create that Lenten playlist, and then maybe create an Easter playlist so that you've got some contrast in what you're hearing. And then, clearing out your room and so on. The make room part of it, there's so many possibilities for acts of generosity and hospitality, but one that I wanted to mention comes from Tracy Smith's book, Faithful Families, which I have to say, when I said I had trouble finding resources when my kids were little, I really wish that I had that book at the time.
I second that book too.
So I think that Tracy got this idea from another book called The Hopeful Family by Amelia Richardson Dress, which is also a beautiful book. Anyway, it's a favorite things box. And you get a box, and you could decorate it if you want. And then everyone in the family chooses something that they particularly enjoy. Like maybe it's a favorite cereal that you only get as a treat, or maybe it's a favorite kind of chocolate or tea, or just something that's special to you. And then you put it in the box, and then that is given away to an organization that can use it. And the reason I like it, I think, is because it's perilously easy, and I know I've done this myself, to kind of start thinking about giving as shunting off the stuff that we just don't want anymore. And the favorite things box creates a bit of a mental shift. So it becomes not just passing on stuff you don't want, but actually sharing things that you truly value, which I think is a different matter altogether. And then I love to do things with children that involve transformation. So planting seeds is probably the most obvious. whether you plant really fast growing seeds, like make a little Easter garden. Okay, that's what this is.
Yeah.
The big thing there is a clay tomb that I made. But you could also just use a potato and, you know, carve it out, and that it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then I sowed grass seed around there. I think we did that on Good Friday, and then watered it and put it in the sun, and it had begun to sprout by Easter. If you're a gardener, depending on what latitude you're at, you could start some seeds indoors with children. Baking with yeast is just a terrific activity. My kids were still in the high chair, and they can still scoop and pour and stir, and if they can't do that, they could even just like smell the spices or count the raisins or just sort of be involved in the process of baking. And yeast is just so, I mean, even now as an adult, when I proof yeast to make bread, I just stand there and watch it sometimes because I just find it fascinating to see it at work. I mentioned the seasonal table, the Easter garden. If you have older children, an interesting transformation activity is refinishing a piece of furniture. And one year when my kids were a lot younger, too young to be refinishing furniture, I just got a bunch of these wooden puffy hearts from a craft store and gave them each a piece of sandpaper. And we just sanded the hearts and then just dyed them. I think that was a year when Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day coincided. So we were again working with this idea of tending to something, like not pruning it in a really violent way, but just caring for and tending to it and rubbing away the rough edges and making it more what it was intended to be. Rock tumbling is something that Tracy mentions in her books. Yeah. The only thing with rock tumbling, in my experience, is it works terrifically well if you have a really high quality rock tumbler. If you don't, it can be really frustrating. So that's just something you kind of have to decide whether that's a priority, or maybe if you're with a congregation, that's a worthwhile investment. You might want to be doing it year after year. But no, I have, you can buy rock in rough chunks like this, and then by the end, you have these beautiful smooth stones. But I think probably the best and the simplest Lenten activity for me is going for a walk outside and just looking for signs of transformation and new life, whether it's watching for, my daughter and I were out yesterday trying to find the first robin. She thinks she saw one, I didn't. If you're in the woods and you poke up or pick up well, maybe not even touch it, but just look under a log that's fallen, and it leads to these conversations about how in nature there are these cycles of life and death, and one is always coming out of the other. And right, like in Godly Play, you can't pull apart that card that's got the Easter story on one side and Good Friday on the other. They are attached.
Right. Yeah. Laura, that you need to write a book or a blog post about all those wonderful ideas you just shared about Lenten practices. Those are so useful and practical, and I love the idea of just transforming a little space or simply going for a walk, because kids are so observant, aren't they? They notice every little. I know this from my grandchildren. They notice every little thing that we sometimes miss. So.
And it can be really instructive, because as adults, we're very task oriented, where I'm going to the store, I have my list in my head, and it's a whole different experience to go for a walk with a young child, because everything's fascinating, whether it's the gum wrapper blowing down the street, or it could be anything, but it's just really kind of a spiritual practice to slow down and look through somebody else's eyes.
You're right. Just the noticing. Yeah. Children are so good at that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know I saw a couple little things come up in the chat, the Q&A, but I think Rachel answered one of them, right, Rachel? Did we miss
Yes.
anything?
Someone was looking for the title again of that book by Jennifer Grant, so I
Oh,
got that to them, the Sing, Wrestle, Spin.
thank you.
Wendy says, Laura, she said the cloth book. She asked about the board book, but she said St. Francis de Sales talked about reducing things down to simple but deep images. You have done this, and she would love to know more of how you entered and fostered this distilling process.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you. How do I enter the distilling process? Silence. When I spoke with Glenys about sitting with the story of Jesus in the wilderness, when I am when I have a head full of ideas or concepts or an idea that's too big for what I am trying to express, I will just sit quietly and let it percolate. But I need to have time and I need to have space to do that. One way I get that time and space is I walk. Walking is a significant spiritual practice for me, because that's when my unconscious, it's not always, sometimes I'm conscious of it, but I will let those ideas percolate and work. And somehow they seem to distill themselves. It's kind of a mysterious alchemy, so I didn't really answer your question, but the walking, the space, the silence, and just kind of being patient. And also, I carry a notebook and a pencil with me all the time. In fact, this happened to me just the other day. There was something, an idea that I'd been working on, but I just couldn't get the right words for it. I had too many words. And then all of a sudden, I was out for a walk and this phrase just popped into my head. And I had to stop and write it down because it's exactly what I needed. And I don't really know where it came from, except that I just had to wait for it.
Yeah. We're alike in those ways, Laura. I also find my inspiration outdoors. My favorite place to write is under a tree, and I've been known to write notes on napkins, when I'm out, like a sudden thought will come. It's like, I have to just get this down. Yeah.
And don't lose it. All these little scraps.
Right. Well, I know that we're almost out of time, but before I ask you what's coming next, or I did have a question about a different book, but I just wanted to thank you also for what you said about when we talked about that little picture of the cross, this one right here, and how I meant to refer to that and I kind of forgot, but I really appreciate the way you don't gloss over the death of Jesus, because as you said, you can't get to the resurrection without the death. Mm-hmm. But for me as an author, when I first started writing, I didn't really appreciate that it's best to leave it up to parents when they want to introduce the details, and go into more depth about how Jesus died. So I just wanted to say thank you for the way you treated that it's right there and it's evocative. Children know it's a big deal, it's sad, but that we don't need to say anything about substitutionary atonement or just hard theological details like that. And as a writer, that's something that I have grown more, and appreciate now. So I think it's done so well in this little book for little ones.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Laura, before we leave, I wondered what was next for you, what you have coming up, and very quickly, people on the call, if you don't have this book, which is the next liturgical season, Breathe talks about Ascension, Pentecost, and the Growing Time. That's a wonderful book written in a similar vein to Make Room. Is there a board book on the horizon for this, do you think, Laura?
I don't know. I guess it'll depend on how this one does, perhaps.
Yeah, so everybody buy it. Everybody pre-order your copies, and then she can do a board book about this one. So what's next then? If you're not sure about the board book for Breed yet, what's next?
Well, I've got 2 books coming out over the next couple of months. One is called Sun in My Tummy, and oh, there it is. And it's kind of a lyrical or a poetic introduction to photosynthesis and the way things are interconnected in this intricate way. So I'm really excited about this one. And then I also have my first picture book biography called The Astronomer Who Questioned Everything, the story of Mariah Mitchell. And it's the life story of the pioneering American astronomer from Nantucket. So it's coming out at the start of May. And then I'm also looking forward to another book with Paraclete Press in the fall called Here, the Dot We Call Home. And this one has an environmental theme, but it's also, I mean, it starts out with this little girl noticing evidence that people lived in her house before her. And this kind of is a little bit mind-blowing. And so then she starts thinking about the people who might come after her. And so it's about learning that we are all both descendants and ancestors, and that we have this shared task of looking after our home, this precious planet.
Oh, wow, that sounds wonderful. And I love the cover. That's a really
yeah, it's cute, eh?
That's a really sweet cover. Yeah, yeah. Well, Laura, thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you today. It was so good to be here, and thank you to Rachel and Paraclete Press. And I know she's jumping on now. That's so cute.
I couldn't resist sharing your felted eggs, Laura. I think that's the most adorable picture I've seen.
I meant to mention felted eggs, wet felting. That's another great activity.
I love it.
I also want to thank you, Glenys. For anyone who doesn't know, not only is Glenys an author many times over, but she's also exceptionally generous and supportive when it comes to encouraging other writers. So Glenys, thank you for doing this today, for joining me.
You're so welcome. I always say we're in this together, you know. So yeah, it was great to be here.
Thank you so much to both of you. I'm just reminding everyone who's listening that if you've entered that giveaway, look in your email for the follow-up to this conversation. We'll announce the winner there, and then be sure to send me your address when I ask for it so I can send you this fantastic little bundle of books. Yeah, as Laura mentioned, Here, the Dot We Call Home will be coming in September. We're so excited about that. That's going to be a beauty. And I'm also very happy to tell you that in 2024, Paraclete will be publishing our first book with Glenys.
Yay!
Song of the Seasons. So it's a little ways away, but I'm already excited about it. So I know others will be.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm excited too. Yeah.
Can't wait. In celebration of the launch of Make Space for Jesus, we're offering a special. Of course, we always encourage you to go to your local bookstore first, but you can also find all of Laura's books from your favorite online retailers. And if you visit Paraclete Press today, you can use a coupon code. I just have to make sure I get it right. Spring22 with an exclamation point. And you'll get a discount of 20% off all of our children's books, not the big collections, but all our individual children's books. So be sure, if you want to buy copies of this book or any of Laura's books, to come visit us today. Thank you again to both of you. So grateful for this time together. So grateful for your shared wisdom on how to share these important parts of our faith with little ones. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for joining us. And blessed Lent to everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Glenys. Thank you, Rachel, and everyone who came.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.